YouTube vinyl community, Paul Revere, and the Raiders fans. Random people on the internet, my name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about Paul Revere and the Raiders album from 1967, Revolution. This is pretty cool. Let's look at the shrink on it with an old price sticker of $3.15. Wow. It would be cool to live at a time where records were that cheap. Paul Revere and the Raiders were a 60s pop group, garage rock band. They had a lot of success being on TV with Where the Action Is, or Happening 68. They were a band that definitely had a little bit of a time struggling with the changing music scene in the later 60s before eventually having a giant hit with Indian Reservation in 1971 as the Raiders, not Paul Revere and the Raiders, had dropped that to grow up and mature a little bit, they said. Which went on to be one of the best-selling singles for Columbia Records for like a decade. So it was a giant smash for them. But at this time, this album came out in mid-67, actually August 7th of 67. The band had undergone several lineup changes, and it had been doing that for years. There was the classic lineup of like 63 to 66, because the band had existed for quite a while at this point. But at this point, three of the guys left. Jim Valley, Phil Volk, and Mike Smith had left the band. And they were replaced by, well, Drake Levin was the guitarist in the band for a long time. He left to join the National Guard. And then with those three guys left, Drake came back to fill in. Was shown that he was not wanted back in the group. He taught new guy Freddie Weller how to play the guitar on the certain songs they were doing, especially for the Ed Sullivan Show that they were on that night. Freddie Weller eventually went on to have a giant solo career as a country artist with songs, games, people play, and all that kind of stuff. So he did all right for himself. But this version of the band consists of Paul Revere, Mark Lindsay, who are the main stables of the group, Freddie Weller, Charlie Coe, and Joe Jr. at this point in the group. In 1967, they were also Capitol's biggest selling rock act. And their greatest hits album that came out earlier this year was the first to test like a higher price tag, just like Bob Dylan's greatest hits had done as well, because they knew it would be a big seller, so they hiked the price up a little bit to get some more dough out of the kids. But this album in particular, you know, they had a string of hits with Kicks and Hungry and, you know, Just Like Me. This album did produce a really good song with Him or Me, What's It Gonna Be, which is a number 5 hit in the US and which is number 1 in Canada. Very cool. It also had the track I Had a Dream, which is number 17 in the US and number 2 in Canada. So some pretty big songs off this thing. You know, like for a band that a lot of people saw as like a singles group, this album for me shows them not being a singles group and a group that was meant to be taken seriously, especially because the time this came out was right after Sgt. Pepper. Like, this was a big summer to have music out if you were in a band. And there's a ton of moments on this thing that just beg for the listener to take them seriously, which I was completely caught off guard. It's been a long time since I've heard this album, so for me, revisiting it was a lot of fun to kind of be like, wow, these guys they have a really couple of really serious songs on here that totally are not Kicks or Just Like Me or Hungry, any of that stuff. Very good stuff. So the first track on this thing, Him or Me, What's It Gonna Be, is a great opening track and a great single. It's just it's full of some really great rocking moments, but then you get some nice subdued parts. It's just filled to the brim with super solid vocal performances, as this whole album is. But there's really nice guitar fills, really tight background vocals, really excellent descending and ascending melody lines throughout this thing, which, like I've said before in other videos, I'm a sucker for. There's nothing like that cool build-up or cool build-down. You know, it's super enjoyable to listen to. It's a good head bobber of a song and totally deserved that number 5 status in the US and number 1 in Canada, so good job, guys. I mean, just look at this cover. Like, they're having tea. Mark Lindsay actually grew his ponytail out to do that. That wasn't fake. He went with the part to match their outfits. Man, the 60s were a crazy time. Reno is the next track on this thing, and Reno was an interesting song. It starts off with some really nice bluesy guitars and a really good lovelorn sort of harmonica, kind of beckoning for a lost love. The drums on this thing kind of plod along underneath, very nice. They're kind of a good like straight man to the tambourine that's nonstop on top of this thing. And Mark Lindsay's awesome tough guy vocals really shine on this track a lot. I love that barroom piano that's kind of sprinkled throughout this thing. Now that blends in with the harmonica at the end of the song. It's kind of a short track, but I like the quick kind of urgency that it promotes. Upon Your Leaving, this track was really cool too. This caught me by surprise as well. The huge echo on the big thunderous drums, played by Hal Blaine. Hey. The really clean guitar that sounds just like something off of, like Time Is On My Side by the Rolling Stones. And the heartbreak in the vocal delivery really make for a great performance. It's a really awesome track, and with one of the first songs in this album that kind of like took me by surprise, in the sense that like, wow, this is like a really serious song. It's not like your upbeat, peppy garage rock song. It's like, this is kind of a heavy song, man. Really powerful production on this thing. Like Terry Melcher produced this album, also arranged the tracks, but this track in particular is the first one out of several on this album that are definitely should have been a single, or should have been played on the radio, or should be remembered as, a band more than just a couple of 3-hit singles. Maureen, this song's really cool. I love the fuzz guitars throughout this thing. They're really, the fuzz guitars on top of the clean guitars, which have a nice little bass element in the background. It's a good round, full kind of experience there. I love the sing-songy vocal melody, and the organ riff, and the walking bass that kind of travels up and down throughout this whole thing is very fun. But and the vocals on this thing are kind of smooth, which I like. A little bit of a different take there. Wanting You. Again, more of that heavy drum production and some totally unexpected vocal arrangements on this one. They go places vocally that you don't hear on an album by a band like this. It would almost be like if the Monkees' first album had like, I don't know, A Day in the Life on it or something. It's kind of like a really meant to be taken seriously vocal approach. Not like you're just bopping along, singing I Love You songs. Like, this is some heavy stuff. For me, this song is like a lost 60s classic. I would totally put it up there as a lost classic for sure. I love the emotion and the drama in this song. It's just a heavy, heavy track. Very cool. And then track 6, Gone, Moving On. A very cool guitar riff that kind of thumps along. There's really nice smooth background vocals. And Mark is throwing all of his emotions into this one. And everything from sensual to angry. That dynamic makes for a really fascinating listen. And the track, once again, it benefits from Hal Blaine's drumming throughout this whole thing. Just a blast to listen to his drums. He's got kind of that like laborious Brian Wilson approach to some of his drumming, but the echo and the feel to it is unreal. Very cool. I Had a Dream starts off side 2, and again, this was a number 17 single in the US, number 2 in Canada. But this track definitely has like a Sgt. Pepper vibe in its like delivery with the guitar. It's got that almost Taxman, Sgt. Pepper kind of guitar in the rhythm. The brass touches are really nice. They're exciting and they're peppy. And there's more complex vocal harmonies throughout this thing as well. Rapidly changing chords, which is cool. The yawns are nice. The background vocals are a nice touch as well. It's a totally rocking head bobber of a song. So, I mean, it was big for its time, but I think it's one of those songs that kind of got forgotten about as time went on. But nonetheless, cool track. Tighter. This song was interesting. I saw this song as like something you'd like sync up to a montage, like something that would play in the background while a montage of like somebody trying to like woo a girl would happen or something. Like it had that like that TV show vibe to me. It reminds me a lot of The Girl That I Knew Somewhere by the Monkees. It's got that kind of vibe to it. But I love the excellent hi-hat work on the drums throughout this thing. The echo production is awesome. The bass on this song I really liked a lot. And this is kind of a far-out kind of track. Very interesting. Make It With Me. This song is totally like a heavy garage rock song in the beginning that leads to some really clean guitars. There's barely any bass throughout a lot of this song too, which leaves a kind of big open sparseness, which is interesting because most of this album is so dense. So to hear something like that really sticks out a lot. But then it comes crushing back in different parts of the song. Weird production on this track. I don't know what happened, but like the last few songs, these two songs, that Make It With Me and the next track, Ain't Nobody Who Can Do It Like Leslie Can. These two tracks have a very different production from the rest of the album. And I wonder why. Like they're all produced by Terry Melcher, but the feel and the sound and everything is much more drier and kind of a little sparse. Um, so yeah, that leads to the next track. This one's actually sung by Paul Revere. Ain't nobody who can do it like Leslie can. That just rolls off the tongue. This song's okay. It's kind of cheesy. It's kind of hokey. It's a little bit on the humorous side. It's a nice touch, I guess, after some of the heavier moments, but definitely comes across as like maybe not the best choice to put on an album where they're trying to prove themselves as a more serious group. Um, it's a super short song, so it flies by anyway, so no great shakes there. But and it also just totally does not work with the last song on the album. I feel like that's sequencing was a poor choice on that one. But the last song here, I Hear a Voice, easily one of the most interesting Paul Revere and the Raiders songs I've ever heard. It's got a very introspective sort of maudlin piano, and it's psychedelic in its sparse sort of delivery. The vocals that come in are used also sparingly and in what feels like random places. It's set up like a song, but there's no chorus per se. There's no like repeat lines. There's no bridge. It kind of just explores, which is fascinating to listen to. The piano itself, I mean, the piano itself, it sounds like it's never heard a pop song before, and it's only heard what beautiful music sounds like, and that's all it knows how to play. And it's not afraid to be on a pop album and show that. But the way it's sung with these like group vocals sounds like a hymn that was written while on LSD or something. It's a very psychedelic, far out kind of experience. I mean, it's just a trippy kind of song. Very much an unexpected turn on this album, and it fades out, which is a very cool effect. So that leaves me thinking, like, this album has a lot of humongously strong moments on it, but some of the sequencing is a little bit bizarre, and some of the choices were a little bit lacking. Like, those middle two songs, Make It With Me and Ain't Nobody Who Could Do It Like Leslie Can, I probably would have dropped those two songs and added something else in there, because having Ain't Nobody and then I Hear a Voice following it, that doesn't work. Having this like jokey kind of humorous song and then jump into like a really heavy, dense song without there's no chorus there, and it's an absolutely beautiful piece of work, that's for sure. But makes for a really disjointed side two. Side one is pretty strong. Side two is a little bit shaky, but overall not bad, just a little bit shaky. So here's the back cover of the new group, the new version of the Raiders here. And you can buy a couple more of their albums there. The Greatest Hits album came out earlier this year, earlier in '67. So they're showing that off up there too. And I'll show you the record. This is not the original sleeve. It's one that I put on there. But Columbia Stereo, 2i label. Very much of its time. So, yeah, overall, this is a very enjoyable listen from a band that was highly regarded as, you know, just a pop group, not really meant to be taken seriously, even though they were trying to do that vehemently, and they would eventually have success with it a few years later, but this thing does not want to go back in. There we go. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this thing. It's a very enjoyable listen. There's some really interesting moments on here. A lot of dynamic changes. I really liked a lot of the emotion that Mark Lindsay gives off. I mean, his voice is just fantastic to listen to anyway. So hearing him do things like the garage rock screaming, but then hearing him also do like really somber delivery or really like love lost delivery, just kind of shows how much of a powerful frontman he was, to sort of dominate the tracks. I think without his voice and without his delivery, a lot of these tracks would lack a little bit, but the musicianship behind it also speaks for itself too. You got people like Dylan Campbell and Hal Blaine and a bunch of the other Wrecking Crew people on here, really giving it their all. So there are some super serious tracks on here, but some really excellent pop rock tracks. I mean, Him or Me, Who's It Gonna Be, or What's It Gonna Be, and I Had a Dream are absolute 60s classics. So that said, I'd probably give this thing like a 7 out of 10. Like I said, on side 2, there's a couple of shaky songs there I would have personally changed myself if I could have, but hey, you know, Can't win them all. But overall, I highly recommend this album. I think it's just a fun listen. Great group of songs, and it's fun to hear them dive a little deeper than just pop hooks and trying some new things. So, that said, it was a revolutionary time for the band with members changing and trying to write some new stuff and trying to showcase that they can do more than just garage rock anthems. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but showing off their dynamics. So that's it. 7 out of 10. My name is Giggens. This has been album reviews with Paul Revere and the Raiders featuring Mark Lindsay, Revolution, for $3.15 at Exchange Record Store. Buy it at your local Exchange Record Store. Back in time. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.